It's a strange phenomena that I see with a lot of younger people, that they want this dream job. And it's because you were sold a dream lifestyle through Hollywood. Hollywood exists to advertise. That is their sole goal. Them creating movies and stories and things for you to watch and ponder is secondary to the advertising, to the idea of getting you to want a certain type of lifestyle, right? So we see the Terminator wearing a particular pair of sunglasses in the 80s, and then everybody wants to wear those sunglasses, for example, old gargoyles back in the day, okay? So this is what it's designed to do. It's an apparatus and I'm not criticizing this. There are some really good qualitative content that has come out of Hollywood. Okay, we see with like Coen Brothers and what have you. I mean, like, there are movies that are really good that are just there to just be art unto themselves. Frank Capra comes to mind also. So that does exist, but it's few and far between. Most of what you're seeing is just an advertisement, and part of that advertisement, okay, the big part of that, is a lifestyle that doesn't really exist and never did. Okay, let me explain this. What did Ferris Bueller's dad do for a living? It's never really addressed, but he has this nice office and he drives a really nice car. He has a big house and is able to afford this lifestyle that most of us nowadays would look at that and go, dude, like, who lives like that, right? I mean, almost nobody, statistically speaking. Okay, I realize there are people who live like that, because many of them are my customers, so I know people that are like that. But many of them are in debt up to their eyes, right? I mean, many of them are about to go under because they are so in debt, right? So who lives like that actually has all of this in cash, and that and that has this secure type of existence? Almost nobody. Right? Again, statistically, we're talking like, so 90% of us, let's say, don't have that life, and probably never will and never did. So you could say that, well, it was aspirational. Yes, it's aspirational, but aspiration has to be something that's actually achievable, right? So I'm not going to ever be a professional basketball player, for example, right? So if that's my inspiration and I'm aspiring to be a great professional basketball player, it's probably not going to happen. In fact, most people would look at me and say, dude, you're out of your mind, right? You're like 6'3" on a good day, and that's if your hair is like big. So anyway, my point is that much of that didn't exist. It's just like the Kevin's dad in Home Alone, right? We all, there's like, it's a meme, right? People talk about it. And most of these things were just there to tell people, yeah, hey, if you went and got more education, you would have these lifestyles. The thing is that it wasn't just the education that did it, right? It's also, there's a timing aspect, and there's also a fair amount of raw talent and ability and so on. There's a whole bunch of aspects to it that have to come together. And then on top of that, there has to be, a system or a game that you understand the rules to that game, and that you understand why those rules existed. Well, most people are not taught that the rules of the game that we have now and have had for a long time, right, is to rip off anybody around you. Now, I know there's a whole bunch of people out there. It's all the rage right now to just criticize capitalism. And of course, none of these guys ever really define it. They always say, they talk about it as though they know what they're talking about. But once again, it's academic. They're not. Most of them have never owned businesses or risked any of their money. They've never lost hundreds of thousands of dollars of their own money on business ventures. They've never done any of these things. They've heard somebody else talk about it. So even from their perspective, even though they're criticizing something, they're not criticizing it from the inside. They're criticizing it from the outside. As someone who's been in business for a very long time, about 35 years, I can tell you that my criticism is from the inside. And I look at it and I see it like, okay, well, so what's my criticism? My criticism is that, okay, if we're going to have a game, then that means everybody has to have the same rules. Now, unless you want to just say, okay, there's no more rules. Okay, well, if there's no more rules, then why the hell are you bothering to stop for cops when they turn the lights on? Seriously. Why are you obeying any laws? Right? I mean, and I'm actually asking this because a lot of you haven't taken the time to ask yourself these questions. Like, why do you stop at stop signs? Well, that's the rules. Well, yeah, you've got a whole bunch of people. In fact, I just tweeted this out yesterday, that we are where we are right now in this world because 30 years ago, 40 years ago, 50 years ago, a bunch of kids sat in a classroom and did exactly what they were told. And they behaved, and they got good grades, and they did what every adult told them to do. And that sounds good in theory, but times change, and the environment changes. Okay, that's just change is a constant. It's part of the laws of physics. Okay, it's constant, and trying to make everything stay the exact same is a fool's errand. So if you're paying attention and doing good grades and on and on and on, trying to keep everything be the exact same, you end up with this. You end up with this mess right here. A whole bunch of people with knowledge that is 30 and 40 years old and way out of date. Way out of date. And I'm not talking about technology. Fuck technology. I'm not even talking about that. All right, I mean, this is cool that I can talk to potentially, thousands of people, through one video here. That's all great and amazing, but I'm talking about just more in the practical sense in terms of day-to-day life, right? Day-to-day existence, because that's the part that everybody gets hung up on. It's one thing to talk about something in an abstract sense about, what life is like, but it's another thing to actually live it, because most of life is boring. Right? I mean, if you were to follow me around on my day-to-day existence, you would go, my God, you are the most boring motherfucker on this planet. Yes, I am. I wake up and I go do work. And most of the work I do is pretty boring. It's pretty mundane, right? And I do it because it makes me money, and then I can use that money to exchange it for whatever it is that I want. Now, unfortunately, the money is becoming worth less and less and less and less and less. This goes back to our rules problem here, doesn't it? Because when you guys criticize all of the idea of a free market and capitalism and so forth, you never bring up the money, the actual money. The actual money. Like, is it being debased? I talk about it on a regular basis here. It's constant for me because it is being debased. And that problem is what's causing all of these other issues. And the reason most people don't recognize it is because you've spent so much time being told to obey people in authority that you haven't been able to say, hold on a second here, why do you have the authority you have? Who the fuck put you in charge? Where is all, who died and made you God? What the fuck? Hold on. You've been told to be obedient for so long, most people. It's practically in your DNA at this point, right? I think I did an old video where I talked about that, where I think a lot of people are actually being bred to be slaves, and I think that that's actually happening. And because you're not questioning any of this, you're not saying, hold on a second here. Think of it like this. If you were to start telling people, impossible employers, governments, doesn't matter, that they need to justify to you, explain why they're doing something, you realize most of them can't. You realize if you ask a cop, like, why are you pulling me over for rolling a stop sign? They can't actually answer that question. What they do is they appeal to authority. They say, well, because of the law, blah, 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 blah. So-and-so made society, rules, we live in a society, all that bullshit. Okay. And it's like, yeah, but dude, you can think for yourself. Can you not? Are you not an upright, walking, talking, sentient human being yourself? Are you not that? Because there isn't anybody else here. So common sense kind of doesn't like common sense and the reality in which we currently live trump a bunch of rules that make sense in an abstract sense. Yeah, maybe if you're dealing with a large number of people or something, but in reality, it's different. This is the same problem. It's the same issue. It's the advertising. It's the constant, and I'm not talking about like advertising shit to buy. I'm talking about it's the advertising into your mind about the way the world works and its rules. Remember, where do most laws come from? We talked about this. Where do most laws come from? Most laws come from somebody getting rich and then saying, oh my God, I better create a bunch of laws to make sure nobody else can become rich so that I can remain rich by contrast. That is where most laws come from. It's where the vast majority of them come from. Somebody got rich somewhere, and now we have to create a bunch of laws to make sure that nobody else can do that, right? So It's like, think of it like this. How did you become a landowner in 1805? How did you become a landowner? How did you become a landowner in 1805? You went about 5 miles west and you conquered the land, right? By hook or by crook, doesn't matter. Morality aside, we're taking morality completely out of this. How did you become a landowner in 1805? You went about 5-10 miles west and you conquered that land. You fenced it off and said, this is mine. That's it. You took it, right? That's what happened. But then we create a bunch of laws and say, oh, you can't do that now. Only after a bunch of people already did that. Seems a bit hypocritical, don't you think? Well, this is the problem with this kind of thing. This is where this issue comes from, is with people making a lot of money, and then they say, we don't want anybody else doing that because, well, we can't allow that because then there'll be too many people doing it, and if everybody does it, then it's not worth anything. Much like college degrees, right? Much like a lot of things in life, that if everybody and their brother decides they're just going to jump into it and do it all at once, then it's like, well, then why do it, right? You kind of see where I'm going with all of this. There is a rhyme to everything I'm talking about here. There's a rhythm and a cadence to all of this, and it's because all of this is the stuff that you would see in the real world if you have the eyes to see it and the ears to hear it. Okay, and where you get that from is from actual experience. There's no amount of degrees, there's no amount of accreditation, there's no amount of lecturing that will do any of that for you. There's no amount of that. You have to go out and experience this shit, okay? You have to go out and try to do all the shit that these people tell you that it will work. Try it. Watch what happens. For most of you, it's not going to work. Right? Just like all the people are saying, like, wait a minute here, hold on. I went to college. I spent all this money. I went into all kinds of debt. I did all the shit that they, the ominous they, told me to do. And like you did, and then it didn't work for you. Why? It's because it was probably never really intended for you to really do any of the stuff that they said you should do, right? It was like, well, okay, what if everybody does this? That's the problem, generally speaking, with Ponzi schemes. If everybody goes to take out their money all at one time and say, okay, hey, I've made my fill. I've got all the money I want. I'm going to take it out now and go do stuff with it. And now it becomes, I want to make it real to myself, and then go do something with it. Then it's like, oh, not everybody can do that. Yeah. There's a movie, The Wolf of Wall Street. That is flat explained in that movie. It's flat explained exactly how that works. You never want the client to take their money out. You want to keep going because it's a gambling addiction, right? I said this a long time ago, I think, but like you've got a bunch of people, that a bunch of Americans believe all of this stuff, that if you just keep gambling in the system, you'll just keep winning, because for them, they keep winning. It's only on paper. Try cashing that in and then going to do something with it. And they're like, well, but I don't know what I would do with all my money if I took all my millions of dollars out of the stock market. What would I do with it all? Exactly. Why did you bother doing it if you had no end goal in mind? If you had no idea what you were going to do with any of this, then why the fuck did you even do it? This is like a dog chasing a car. What do you do with a car when you catch it? Nothing. You stay there. You stand there and bark at it. You understand? Like, there's this really strange existence that people have gotten themselves into. And it's always about the chase of what we're doing, instead of saying, okay, well, what exactly is the goal? Part of this can be solved by just kind of looking at your life in 3 phases. The first phase is to gain as much knowledge as you can. Input, right? Your 5 senses are all input. Okay, you're bringing information, data into you, right? That's what you're doing the entire time. That's the first phase. The second phase is to go out and use that knowledge to at least establish a baseline and create your wealth. Now, wealth is a very, very relative term, and that should not be taken to mean just dollars and cents, okay? That is a very relative term to people. And you make a mistake, particularly women make this mistake when they only look at the physical measures of success, as opposed to looking at looking at someone looking past that and going, maybe that person has moved past the idea of the physical trappings and is actually going to be something that's beyond what you would think of in terms of actually a wealthy a wealthy man, right? Okay, it does happen. It's rare. It's extremely rare, but it's out there, and there are men out there that are like that. Okay, but that mistake gets made by a lot of people. They look at it only in the physical. You've never bothered to actually think about, like, what if you did have all that shit? You ever stop and think about this for just a second here? What if you did actually have all the shit you could ever want? What if every wish that you ever had in your mind, every little weird fleeting thought ever came true? What would your life be like? You'd be bored as hell by the time you were 25. You would be practically, I don't know if I can say the word, but it's the, thing. I mean, you'd be practically there, okay? So that's what happens to people. There was actually an interview with Will Smith, right, where he talked about that. Will Smith, of all people, right? He talks about this. He's like, he made all this money, and he's like, there's basically nothing I couldn't buy. And then I had this realization of, like, oh my God, I'm miserable. I've got everything I could possibly ever want, but, like, this isn't gonna solve. No, it's never gonna solve your problem. It's never gonna solve your problem. Right? Now, this isn't saying that, all rich people are miserable. That's not what I'm saying. Because there are plenty of rich people that are very happy, right? But what I'm pointing out is that, that's just not going to solve that for people, especially people who are a bit more cerebral. Just more money, more bags of loot isn't going to do anything for you at a certain point. You're going to have to move on to phase 3. Phase 3 is the part that nobody gets to for whatever reason. We have a world full of billionaires right now that are still stuck in phase 2, still chasing billions of dollars. Like, what the fuck are you going to do with all of that? What exactly is your plan to do with any of this? They don't have one. That's the answer. They don't have one. They don't know. They don't know. They have no idea what they're going to do. They're just making money for the sake of making money. There's a character that embodies that, actually, that Charles Dickens envisioned, called Ebenezer Scrooge. Here's a man who's consumed. He's the literary personification of greed itself, right? I mean, if you want to think of it like that. It's like the actual personification of someone who's literally making money for the sake of making money. Won't even make his own life better. Won't even keep a fire going in his own house because it would cost money. So it's in the most literal sense, greed for the sake of greed, right? So you have a bunch of people who are doing this, and it's like, at a certain point, another $1 billion isn't going to change your lifestyle. You've heard me say this before. Not just me, dude. I mean, even Andrew Tate talked about this. At a certain point, wealth maxes out, right? And that's when you're supposed to move on to phase 3. Phase 3 is where you actually advance people, not through academia. It's where you're actually supposed to be teaching. You're supposed to be doing exactly what I'm doing here. All you billionaires, you're supposed to be doing this, not me, right? Not the guy out here, who has, a huge depth of wisdom, sure, but like, this is the kind of stuff that you should be doing. Why is it that someone else is doing it? Well, that's the problem. You're supposed to be doing that. And that's where it gives your life some meaning, right? Is that you're able to genuinely help people by letting everybody else figure it out for themselves, as opposed to, just continuing to rip them off. Or worse, just give them a bunch of shit for free. That's even worse. That's actually even worse. You ruin them that way. That's how you kill people, with kindness. So what was the point? Everything I just said was the point. Everything I just talked about was the point. You can't put that stuff into little encapsulated things. You have to say it that way. It takes time to explain some of this stuff. And unfortunately, we're not doing enough of that. People aren't taking the time to do that. And they don't take the time to realize that, like, hold on, maybe it is time to just slow down a second and think some of this shit through. What is real wealth? Well, I'll give you my opinion. This is just me. The founders of our country were really smart guys. I know white slave owners, blah, whatever the fuck ever, okay? But they were really smart guys. And they saw a nation, right, of people who were free and independent to own property, right, own a part of the country that you told them was theirs. You know, you tell all these young people this is your country, and you tell them you want them to go, you know, like the conscription thing. They want every man in the U.S., you know, from 1826 to be willing to go out and be unalived, you know, in the war machine. Yet they don't even own 1 square foot of the country they're told is theirs, and that they're for which they're going to be unalived for. Has anybody bothered to think about that? Besides me, I mean, I think about this shit all the fucking time. But I mean, like, has anybody else really thought about this? Like, you know, if you don't own any property here, if you own none of the country that you're told is yours, you're told all the time, this is your country. And you're told that you may be unalived for it, yet you don't own 1 square foot of it. And you haven't really been able to enjoy any of the fruits of it beyond maybe an iPhone or some other equally, you know, clever and cool device, but it's not really the same thing as being able to actually have an eye-to-eye conversation with someone sitting across from them at a picnic table, you know, at a dinner. It's not the same feel. Doesn't have. There's nothing that I can say on this screen that's going to give that same feel as that if we're just sitting there, just two people talking and having a normal conversation about nothing, about just random bullshit. Everything doesn't have to be deep and meaningful craziness. Do you see what I mean? Like, that's the part that's missing. It's that connection. And the more connected we all get through this kind of medium, the less connected we are with people in the real world. So I'll give you, as I pointed out, the wealth is that connection, being able to actually have a nation of people and who can voluntarily associate with each other. One of the challenges, of course, with the internet and with video technology and so on has been that we become focused on this. We get a little myopic. Wow. We get a little myopic instead of, you know, focus on what's going on around us personally, because we're spread out. It used to be that we had communities. The communities were people who were all, you know, we all had the same kinds of thoughts and ideas of what life would be like for us. And so, you know, you had a community of 150, 250 people, let's say. Let's go maybe as high as 500 people, right? And most everybody kind of knew everybody. And that's the kind of existence that a lot of us, if we really think about it, that's actually what you want. Because how many friends do you really have? How many friends do all your friends have, right? If you were to put them all together and stuff, it's maybe a few hundred people, tops. It's not millions. It's not millions upon millions, right? It's not how that works. I'm talking about people that you can actually converse with, right? Because even if you have, so I mean, let's say you're a big celebrity online or something and you've got like 5 million followers, you couldn't even have a 5-minute conversation with each one of those followers in person ever in this lifetime. You couldn't do it. It's not possible because of physics, right? Because of just, you know, life is a vapor, right? It's, you know, it's over fairly. It's over before it begins, right? Or so it seems. So it's not possible to do that. So you have to focus, and you're like, okay, well, this is our circle of people in our community, and that's the part that kind of gets missing, especially when you have this giant commercialized version of everything. So I'm not saying this is bad, by the way. I mean, it's great that people have homes and they have running water and plumbing and so on. Like, that's all great. We should all have that kind of thing, and we should all aspire to have stuff like that. But those are basics. Right? Now, does it mean that people have a right to those? No, it doesn't actually. This may come as a surprise to some of you, some of my leftist followers. No, it doesn't mean you have a right to those things, because then you would be obligating yourself, you would be obligating someone else to you. You would be enslaving them, basically, saying, hey, you must do this for me because X, Y, Z. As opposed to, like, hey, we want our community to be like this. Let's all work together on this. There is a difference in the mentality there. Okay? And that was the difference of the wealth that the founders had seen. That they thought that people would be like them in the future. They figured people would have the same types of goals and thoughts and ideas. They thought that. They thought that that people would be like, well, yeah. Now they knew people would be greedy. They knew people would be horrible twats. They knew all that. They knew all that. I mean, like, the people have been horrible for centuries, so they knew all this stuff. But they also thought that maybe people would rise to that and say, okay, hey, listen, we're going to go ahead and be a community, and then break up into smaller communities and so forth, and decentralize. Decentralization. In fact, that's actually the entire idea behind the Constitution, was to decentralize power. All 50 state constitutions, the word democracy doesn't appear anywhere. Yet I still keep seeing people screaming about democracy. The word democracy doesn't appear in any of our founding documents. Why? Because you weren't supposed to be a democracy, because a democracy would just be whatever the mob wanted. That's Rome, right? That's how all that stuff collapses, is just like that. So the wealth was supposed to be, like people being able to be left alone, be individuals. The problem is that in order to have that kind of system, you have the one rule you have to have is a hard currency. And that goes back to what we just talked about 20 minutes ago. That's the rule that's been changed. That's why you don't have those rules any longer, is because the currency keeps changing. The currency changes all the time. The rules are going to change all the time, which means that no one will ever actually know what the fuck the rules are. So all you young people that are complaining about, well, there's no third spaces, there's like, what the hell, how come I can't own any part of the country, and on and on, right? It's because of that. That is exactly what's doing it. It isn't corporate greed. It isn't. You think that corporations haven't always been greedy? Oh my God. People have always been greedy. That's how people are. That is a natural part of existence on this planet, is dealing with the greed of others and yourself. And by the way, you have to actually recognize that in yourself before you can recognize it in anybody else. You better go deal with the mirror first before you start pointing fingers to everybody else. I'm not kidding about that. Okay? You think I'm not greedy? Of course I am. Of course I am. But I put that in check, because I do understand that you actually have to have something a little bit bigger than that. You do have to have something a little bit bigger than yourself. And that's all it comes down to, by the way. There was a guy, I saw this video, he said, I saw this earlier today. He's like, what has religion done for anything? Here's the problem with this. Religion itself is usually used as law to basically impoverish people and turn them into slaves. That's true. That's all true. That's what most religions do. There's one thought, though, is what if you had a religion that wasn't a religion, that was just simply saying, hey, listen, y'all got to work together. Y'all got to live with this. And there's no way off this rock. So we should probably all look around and just say, okay, listen, maybe we should find some way to work together. And let's not make a whole bunch of things on earth a bunch of idols. Because it's very easy to do. Oh my God, my back. Okay, so it's very easy to turn everything into an idol. That's one of the reasons why it says, in the Bible, for example, say this is an atheist. Okay, that's why Josh said, don't have any other false gods. He's talking about idolatry. He's talking about creating gods out of whole cloth. Right? That's what he's talking about. Don't do stuff like that instead, because then what happens is people tend to focus on that, and they turn that into a deity rather than say, okay, listen, any god of this world, if there was a God that created everything that we know, right? If that were true, he would not be on this planet. Therefore, there is nothing here that you have to be worshiping in the physical sense, right? It means that includes doctrine or dogma. That includes all of that. It just simply means, hey, listen, maybe there is some cosmic point to all of this outside of our existence. Maybe that's the case. I would suggest as a physicist that if unalive is eternal, then that means that alive has to be eternal, because for every action there's an equal and opposite reaction. The universe is matter and energy, and matter is basically energy slowed way down. Okay? So, as a physicist, I would tell you that. And if that's the case, then that means there could very well be something beyond all of this. It's entirely possible. And I'm willing to accept that. So, if that's the case, then that means that's what you should be thinking about. If you want to call that God, that's fine. Okay? Then that's what you should be thinking about. Not turning a bunch of shit on earth into a bunch of fucking idols. Not turning a bunch of shit on earth into a bunch of stuff that you're worshiping, in place of something that is outside of your existence. Okay? That exists beyond you, that exists beyond all of this that we understand. That it's outside of our present understanding of a known universe. Fair enough? I think I put enough qualifiers on that, I think. Okay? To maintain my atheist card, I suppose. Okay, so my point is that if you're going to have something like that, then it's much easier to say, okay, well, now we don't need to have all this doctrine and dogma and all these things cluttering up our existences. Now we can actually just focus on what's going to work using the physical world around us, not trying to rip everybody off. I mean, at least make the effort to not rip everybody off, okay? And have an existence. Use the resources that we have to hand, okay? Instead of constantly trying to make a handful of people hyper rich, instead, because the law says you have to do this, you have to do that. Well, they changed the tax codes, and now they've made it more affordable, for me to buy an electric car. They're going to change the insurance policies. Yeah, I get all that shit. Insurance, income tax, inflation, interest rates, these are all controlled by the same people. I've done video upon video of that. Yes, I'm well aware of it. I'm well aware that that's the case, and that's exactly what happens. That's why you have to ask, okay, why the fuck are we doing this? And the people who enforce all that stuff are just people that are not, I'm trying to be kind to police and military. I really am, okay? Because I'm rapidly losing what little respect I had for them in the first place. That's pretty much eroded at this point. And it's because I want you to think for yourself. If there's one thing that I would prefer is that you think for yourself, not let somebody else do the thinking for you. That's horrible. And don't use this crutch idea of, well, but the college has taught me how to think. No, they taught you a way of thinking, not how to think. Not how to think, a way of thinking. And it always comes back to something that they've been advertising over and over. Keep chasing this illusion that doesn't exist, and keep using this money that doesn't exist. This fake currency, this dollar currency that's conjured out of nothing, which is what it will always come back to. Once you get past that, you will see the world very differently. That's all I have.